Just a few words about our speaker for the night. Very busy man. He started teaching ornithology at university after my time. I was working with Vince Hyde, but and he currently has a pretty full slate, teaching ornithology, general ecology, raptor ecology, Arctic ecology, and he also does surveys of gerfalcons in Greenland, and is continuing research with Cooper's hawks. It's been going on for, I believe, 37 years. Yeah. And as a side, growing up here in just north of here in Marathon County, I was interested in the 70s. I could find nesting sharp-shinned hawks, I could find nesting goshawks, but it wasn't until I moved to Stevens Point in the late 70s, early 80s, I saw my first Cooper's hawk in decision, coming to my bird feeder. I know people have mixed feelings about Cooper's hawks and bird feeders, but to me that's always the high point. They also come to feed, and we feed all the birds at my house. Currently, Dr. Rosenfeld is continuing his work with the Cooper's hawk. In fact, his work has led to having it be listed, I believe it was threatened in Wisconsin, or a species of special concern. But we're finding out that it's making quite a move here.
Yeah, now it's a pest.
But in between all of that, he's done work for the federal government and with some hot button type species also of concern, peregrine falcons and northern goshawks. And his Cooper's hawk research is taking him all over the North American continent where he's done his studies. He's published in 100 technical and scientific papers, but the nice thing is he's also been picked up by popular press and popular Discovery Channel, National Geographic, Smithsonian, the sports field. He crosses the line into getting the word out to everybody. And as such, he's a busy, dynamic instructor, and I unfortunately did not have him for ornithology. But I'm pleased to introduce...
Consider yourself lucky.
Not what I...
Some nice, friendly faces. Can you hear me in the back? I like to think I have a very loud voice, so you should be able, and if you can't hear me, move to the front. Thanks for the invite. I got real lucky back in the day to start on a journey that continues. The places it's taken me, and most importantly, in my opinion, the people that I've met and the people that I work with have enriched my life beyond all possible measure. And it would be negligent on my part if I didn't allude to some of that as I start out. I have been very privileged to work with hundreds of undergrad students. And at the very end, I'll tell you about a couple of those students who have attained some very nice professional status. And I'm still working with them some almost 4 decades later. It is true that the study that began whether or not the bird was actually in trouble, because it was a status study, started in 1980. And I have been working in several study sites in central Wisconsin, the southeast part of the state, for these 37 years. But to be full disclosure, 13 years in British Columbia, about 15 years in eastern North Dakota and western North Dakota, 24 years in Milwaukee. These are studies on Cooper's hawks, aside from what it is I'm mostly going to tell you about today. In Albuquerque, New Mexico for about 5 or 6 years. And I also was invited to go to North Carolina and look for Cooper's hawks there. So collectively, it surpasses my age in years. I'm 35. Just so you know.
You mean you were doing this before you were born? Since 30-something.
These are some of my students, by the way, here. Several of these students have worked with me, Ann Richardson and Jenna Cava, an amazing undergrad student, finished up in 3 years, published 5 technical papers with me as an undergrad. Just a remarkable ability. And I've often thought that the students have elevated me way beyond what my game could have done anyway. And these are some of the students at one of my study sites in Greenland. The Wisconsin DNR was instrumental in the beginning of the research. It was a state-listed bird, which I'll get into, but they certainly were the initial funding source and some logistical and expert counsel to the extent there could be expert counsel back in 1980 with a species that was believed to be gone and on its way toward extinction. The biology department has been instrumental. The personnel development committee at UWSP, and like I said, just an absolute army of students. Does anyone recognize the gentleman in the upper left? There's Hammy, there's Frederick Hammerstrom. Yep, Hammy and Fran were on my graduate committee when I did my master's degree at UWSP, and they were instrumental in, one of the main things they were instrumental is I went down to do lunch with them one day to ask them if they would buy my graduate committee. And Fran, who had one good eye and one bad eye, and she's looking across at me at dinner and she says, "You don't know which eye to look at, do you?" I don't, so I was moving back and forth. She said, "It's that one." I never knew which one was good until she popped it out. She says to me, "Are you going to trap adults?" And I said, "Boy, I have so much to do. I got to determine the distribution, the nesting density, the production. They want me to steal eggs if I can find any nests at all, and take those eggs and send them to the Fish and Wildlife Service. They can analyze them for contaminants." And I listed several other things. I got through about those several, and she just rolled. Of course, only one of her eyes. And I knew instantly, I better trap adult hawks. That's what she wanted me to do. And I am so glad she rolled her eyes. Because that has been an instrumental part. So that's me back in the day when we started out the study. And this is me more currently. Marking, capturing adults and marking them and keeping track of individuals is absolutely one of the most important underpinnings to what I consider to be one of the most important success stories of determining the status of the bird. And it stems in a variety of ways that I'm going to tell you about. But just so you know, if you weren't aware, in birds of prey, both the owls and the hawks, there's something called reverse size dimorphism, and the females are much bigger and smarter than the males. So what you got here is, this is a male, an adult male, he's at least 2 years of age, and here's a female, he's 2 years of age. And we attached U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service bands. I took lots of measurements on them, and I'll get to some of those a little bit later. But we also put color marks on them. This is a bird in British Columbia in the city of Victoria. And I cannot impress upon you how vital it was to put those color bands on, because many of these Cooper's hawks get very smart right away. I'd go in with a live great horned owl to catch these guys, and if they'd ever seen my owl just one time, I usually had a pretty good response. They would stoop at it to try to make the owl go away, and of course have a net up, and you get stuck in it. But sometimes it's just that one time, and they never come back. It's like they see the owl and they go, "Oh, that's, his name is Lee, by the way. That's Lee, and there's Bob over there." And they lift up one of their fingers, and they just fly around, teasing me for a long time. But if you put one of these color marks on, people with digital cameras can get a picture of them at a bird bath or on their porch. Right? And the pictures sometimes come to me in the most odd ways, but that has been a real boon to our understanding of some of the kind of things that I'm going to convey to you today. Again, I have to thank some people, and let me do that at the outset so I'm not overlooking something. This is Dr. Ray Anderson. He was the one that enticed me from going to Frostburg State College in Maryland, where I was accepted as an MS student. And he says, "Nope, you got to stay here." And I said, "I've accepted a position." He said, "No, you got to stay here." And it was a gracious offer. I turned it down several times. He says, "Do you mind me asking why you don't want to do this job? We have a lot of money." 20,000, is this being taped?
Yes.
Turn that off. 20,000 bucks. I mean, like, the only money I had in my pocket was something I stole from somebody. I think I thought, 20,000 bucks, I'm like, that's a lot of money. I'll be able to go to school, maybe buy some equipment to do the study. And he says, "That's a lot of money, you know, because you're going to need to travel the entire state looking for the birds." And I said, "Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, the word on the street, even with the Hammerstroms, is there aren't any birds. What data will I defend for my master's thesis?" Well, you sure you don't want to stay? Anyway, long story short, I eventually decided to take him up on his offer. Scared to death. Never seen a Cooper's hawk nest in my life. You had no idea what kind of habitat to look in. And it's amazing the kinds of habitats we found them in. I'm so glad he checked on me. He said, it was as simple as to him, he said, you are the person for the job, I know that. And I guess that was enough for him. This is Dave Evans. To a lot of his friends and colleagues, he's known as Fudd because if he takes his hat off and shaves his beard, he is a dead ringer for Elmer Fudd. I mean, it's unbelievable. Dave is the best bird handler, the best hawk handler I have ever seen, and I have seen some of the very best, I would guess. And he trained me. He's the one that found me hiding in the bushes watching him trap hawks in Duluth, which is my hometown, and got a hold of me and trained me, and taught me how to capture birds, how to hold them correctly, and on occasion take accurate data. You probably know Gene Jacobs. Boy, he has been just a stalwart of support here locally. He, of course, looks for especially red-shouldered hawks, but on occasion he bumps into Cooper's hawks. And he has always conveyed to me when he has found those birds, and several times it leads to a bird that I originally saw as an egg, that I banded as a pup. I call them essence puppies. And then it eventually survived and ends up as an adult breeding bird. He has found several of those sites, a very important kind of find. And occasionally if I find a red-shouldered hawk nest, if I remember, I tell him about it. Anyway, Gene has been instrumental. This is John Bielefeld. John passed on in 2013, former naturalist for Racine County. Boy, did I get lucky, very briefly. Third year of the study, I'd spent all the $20,000, all legally. I wanted to continue the research. And I get a phone call from the DNR. It's Randy Jerwitz from the Bureau of Endangered Research. And Randy says, hey, Bob, I've got $12,000 sitting here. You want it? As long as I don't have to do anything with it, or for it. He says, how did you get it? He says, the Wolf Project was overfunded. We've got this extra money. We're happy with the work you're doing. We'd like to give it to you to extend the work. I'll take that money and any other spare change you got. So, and then once that started happening, some really nifty finds started occurring. And I saw a possibility of really extending some really nifty research. And with the extra money, I could have pocketed a lot just for me and made a nice salary, so to speak. Yeah, right. Or I could do this. I wanted to set up another quadrat, which is like about a 12 square mile area, pick, if you will, at random, and then search every tree in that 12 square mile to see if there are Cooper's hawks there to find out how many you can find in areas. And if you find these sites randomly, and I had like 4 or 5 of these quadrats, I could extrapolate maybe to a density or a population size for the entire state, if they were represented in a quadrat. So with the extra money, I hired John. And John was an incredible communicator. He's still publishing with me posthumously, and a phenomenal, keen observer of things around us. And we collectively, while we were together, we found hundreds of Cooper's hawk nests and published probably together well over 50 manuscripts. I miss him dearly. I miss his insight. He was integral to the success of the study. My gal Maddie helped put a lot of the program together and has been instrumental with helping out in the last several years on some really nifty data sets and organizing them for presentation in technical manuscripts and to the public. This is Bill Stout. Anybody, I got an email at midnight. I can't believe I was up. It was summer. It must have been field season or some darn thing last summer. It was from one of my ex-students and was typing to me from a research vessel in the Pacific Ocean. She was studying marbled murrelets. And she says, Bob, are you okay after your fall from the tree? I didn't fall from a tree. And I started getting phone calls and messages. Bill Stout made YouTube because he fell out of a Cooper's hawk nest tree this summer in Milwaukee. And everyone thought, and it said researcher from Stevens Point. I mean, my God, and I was ready to read an obituary. Anyway, Bill Stout and I, he started working in Milwaukee several decades ago. And he was a PhD candidate at the time. He's finished up. He was at UW-Madison. he was studying red-tailed hawks and great horned owls nesting in Milwaukee. And he started bumping into Cooper's hawks, more and more of them. And I had been studying Cooper's hawks with John Leopold in the Cattle Moraine State Forest, which is, a couple of soda pops to the west of there. And when I heard he was running the coops, I said, geez, I've been banding like 1,000 Cooper's hawks in the Cattle Moraine for like 16, 17 years. Maybe one of my puppies is breeding in Milwaukee. Would that be cool to find? So I asked Bill, hey, could I come there with an owl and we could start trapping? And here we are several decades later with a phenomenal data set and a real tribute to Bill. And he has also been very instrumental. Public citizens are integral, giving me access to their lands, telling me at times when they make observations of the birds, and at times even reading their color marks has been very important. Those kinds of underpinnings absolutely allow this study to put me in this position to convey to you some of the really nifty discoveries and some of the developing discoveries, and one of them is hot off the press just a couple of hours ago, which I can't wait to tell you about. But before we get into some graphs, what does this bird look like to you? It's a hawk. Can anybody detect anything unusual about this bird? Anyone take a guess at what it is? This is a putative or a supposed hybrid. There have been two caught now, a cross between a goshawk and a Cooper's hawk. So let me be clear here. This is Cooper's hawk adult breast with brown barring. Goshawks have a thin, relatively thin if it's a male, a little thicker male, female. Black kind of barring and some black silver streaks on them, black streaks when they're adults. And of course goshawks have this white supercilium line, right? And of course all the genus exhibitors, sharpshin, coops, and goss, get orange or red eyes as their adult. But this is a Cooper's hawk chest, and this is a goshawk head. Another bird that looked almost just like this one was caught on the East Coast. This is in the western, this is out west, and there was a bird caught at Cape May, New Jersey. And they thought, oh, it looks like a hybrid because it has characteristics of both species. So thank God somebody took blood from that bird, right? So we can analyze. I'm happy to tell you that it is a hybrid, and you can get specific with sex determination. And I wondered, was it a male coop or a male goss? What is it? It was a male Cooper's hawk and a female goshawk that produced a hybrid. And that paper is in the works right now. It'll probably be submitted, I hope, this year. And that's the first time. If you did not know this, let me be the first to tell you. Hybridization usually occurs with species that are closely related, so to speak, right? Sharpshins are not as closely related to Cooper's hawks or goshawks. If a hybridization was going to occur, it most likely would be a coop and a goss. And they do, all three species overlap. But you would have expected if there was any hybridization to occur, it would be between the Cooper's hawk and the goshawk. And by the way, there is information, several of my colleagues that study the bird have shown that Cooper's hawks have been moving farther north. There are several very good pieces of information to suggest that's true. Goshawks are more northerly distributed than you might expect. They're going to start interacting. And in this particular case, crossbreeding, whether or not the offspring will be loose, I don't know. Just a couple of potpourri things also. If you did not realize, hawks in general are very reckless when they go after food. And we keep track of oddities across time, and I've caught hundreds of adults and banded several thousand young, so I could actually enumerate the probability of catching something like this. So I won't give you those numbers, but here is a Cooper's hawk that was going after some food and has a stick just right up into the chest. I have caught various species of hawks with sticks going right through their bodies. And of course, something that's so much different in birds of prey versus other birds is, and you don't see this mentioned that much in books, for instance, popular books, are very strong reckless abandonment going after food. And these are the kinds of things that sometimes happen. I had a friend that watched a territorial dispute between two peregrine falcons, and one peregrine hit the other one, and the head came off. It hit it so hard. I'm figuring that bird's dead. The head went one way, and the body went the other way.
this reckless abandon is something that really sets apart birds of prey. That behavioral feature is an important thing. It's just talons. It isn't just having, if you will, a decurved bill or this reverse-sized dimorphism. They are very aggressive at going after food. This guy here, I call him no-tail male. There is a chance, and some of you might have seen him, his breeding territory has really encapsulated where we are right now. There's a couple times I was walking downtown Stevens Point, and he came right over me, just carrying a sparrow one time. The first 2 years I caught him, he had a tail. Look closely, you don't have to look that close. He has no tail. In his third year that I caught him, he lost his tail. And he never got it back. I kept trapping him. I saw him for the next 4 years. He's like breeding for 6 years, which is really, on average, an adult male Cooper's hawk will breed for 3 years. My oldest bird was an 11-year-old. I call him Grandpa. They are very unusual to get that age. And that bird produced 35 young in his life, the max I've ever documented for a Cooper's hawk. And we have really good data on longevity. This bird here, a breeder for 4 years without a butt. And the chicks must have really dug him because he had no problem getting a female every single year and fledging kids. I'm guessing he lost the tail. I can only guess because we didn't do tissue samples on him. But I assume that something hormonally could have happened. And he could have lost his tail from a chemical misbalance of some sort. And there are several ongoing studies, which I'm participating in right now. Because Cooper's hawks have attained a fairly high celebrity in the world, and one of the reasons is that because they have become such an urban hawk. And when you get into an urban environment, you start interacting with all kinds of nasty things. Rodenticides, flame retardant chemicals that are treated into furniture that can actually find their way through the food chain, a variety of things. So some of the things that we might be seeing, I'm working with several scientists in North America right now, is to try to find out what kinds of chemicals might be a problem for some of these populations in some of the cities. I've banded thousands of baby, I have been to, I don't know, collectively in all my studies, certainly 1,500 nests. This is the only kid I ever saw, poor little guy. He had a crossed bill. What caused it? I don't know. It could have been congenital, of course. He's probably okay while he was in the nest because mom could tear apart the food and feed him. But once he gets off that nest, he's not going to make it. This guy just blows my mind. It's to the extent, if you are tearing apart prey and you have blood on your talons, which you're going to, blood is high proteination, it's sticky, like a yolk of an egg. So imagine that you're tearing apart food and you get feathers or fur on it, but you don't clean yourself off that well. And of course, it being male. I've never seen this. But the stuff starts to collect. Imagine you don't take it off enough. You ever tried to remove egg from something, you let it sit for a long time? Good luck with that. So I think what happened was, when this bird came in, this was in the city of Oshkosh, when this bird came in, I'm like, what the is that? And he's got these two clubbed, this is a premier talon. The helix talon, the back talon, which is the longest talon, along with the most medial internal of the three toes forward protect. These are the two killing talons, right? So his premier digits to the front are completely enclosed with clubs. When he beats somebody with it. And he fledged some kids in the city of Oshkosh. He was found dead later the subsequent winter. But very unusual features, and I have several others. I'm working on a book right now to cover a lot of the work I've done on Cooper's hawks, moderate to light technical read, if you will. And one of the closing parts of the book right now in my head, I haven't gotten to this part, was just to write some variations on a theme, some oddity things that I found that might lead others to maybe study some aspects about the life of this bird. This is an article from 1974. If you read this article in National Geographic, you can come away honestly and defendably, but the bird is not going to make it. The answer to this title by Dr. Snyder is no, it's on its way to extinction, the trajectory. And boy, it's just, things have changed so much. Thank that. But there was a time when I started the research and I spent the first several weeks looking for Cooper's hawks. I didn't find a bird, I didn't see anything. I didn't realize at the time I was searching at the wrong time. They hadn't quite started laying their eggs. I didn't know that. But filled in my head was, I'm not going to find any birds. But in the first year of the research in 1980, we found 25 nests in the state of Wisconsin. Blew everybody's mind, mostly mine. And the places we found them in was most unusual. This is the distribution of Cooper's hawks in North America. It's endemic, so it's a bird that you find is simply here in North America. And like I say, it is moving north. I've had study sites here in North Dakota, and again, several places, and I'm doing some research down here, continuing with a PhD candidate down in New Mexico. There's no way this is accurate. This white area is saying there aren't Cooper's hawks. I'll guarantee there are Cooper's hawks there. I look at some of the early field guides, Peterson field guide, and they show gaps in the prairies. In prairies, there is densities that rival some places here in central Wisconsin, which must be really good habitat for reasons I'm about to convey. You would never think that. And by the way, if you don't think that, you don't go looking for them, do you? And then you don't find them. This bird's a prairie hawk. It breeds in the Pacific Northwest forest. It breeds in pine plantations. It breeds in cities. It breeds just about everywhere. What a remarkable flexibility in this animal, which must, in my opinion, have underscored the success story of the pendulum going the other way. If it had been a specialist on something, I suspect it wouldn't be doing so well. But it's a generalist and very adaptable, very flexible. And I strongly believe that's why this bird is doing so well. This is one of the key reasons the celebrity has broadened to such a large extent. This is some data from 1993. Every one of those white dots is a Cooper's hawk nest. And this still is the highest known nesting density in North America. Of course, you've got a major geek looking everywhere to find them. So, right, if they're there, I'm going to get them. You could count all those up, but let me do it a little bit easier. Density is a number of individuals per unit area. Why don't we just say this? In really good habitat, you can have a breeding pair every square mile. What's fascinating to me is right down here. This is McDill Pond right in here, right? These nests they're only about a half a mile, a quarter mile apart in some instances. In British Columbia and Albuquerque, New Mexico, there are breeding pairs. There are breeding pairs that are only like 200 pairs now, just a couple hundred yards apart. Amazing. Why is that? That is an excellent question. This clearly is an important entity in cities. This is a house sparrow. It's a fledgling house sparrow. This is an adult male. I caught him in my nest net. He was bringing in a fluid item. It is fairly well known and fairly well documented around the world that numbers of individuals of songbirds and some other birds and the collective biomass, the weight of those birds, is larger in cities than outside of cities. The diversity of birds is less in cities. But what's there? There's a lot of them. Why are there so many there? Are you kidding me? We feed them. We're all managing Cooper's hawk populations and we didn't know it. Right? It's a multi-billion-dollar job. It's not even coordinated. And everybody's elevating the Cooper's hawk's biology. It's probably related to that. I don't think it's quite that simple. Catch this. Polygyny. Polygyny is, as I tell my ecology students, polygyny, here's a silly way to remember, it means many ginnies. One male bonded socially, why would anyone do, with many females all at one time. So my buddy in Grand Forks, North Dakota, calls me one time and he says, hey Bob, you got a minute? I said, sure. He says, I think this one male is feeding two females. I said, really? He said, yeah. And it's in a cemetery and there's just two nests and they're like, I don't know, maybe 300 yards apart. And I said, I don't know what you're doing right now, but stop it. If you got a girlfriend, get rid of her. Get a chair, get yourself some fluids, and get your butt out there and sit there and watch that site for forever. I mean, polygyny has been documented in the genus Accipiter, several studies in Europe, but no one has found successful polygyny. So, sure enough, he said, you know, he's documented. I feel bad about it to his girlfriend. I didn't think he'd take me literally. I think he's lying to me. So he's watching his bird, and I'm getting updates. And I'm saying, do not let that nest fail. No matter what, guard that nest. Why? We need blood from those kids, and we need blood from the parents, so we can show that this is the sire of both those nests. Right? So they finally get young, and I'm like, I'm not driving up there until I know for sure that everything's a go. We got kids, they're bandable age, and I grabbed one of my buddies and off them in the grandparents. We got in there late in the day, and we brought the owl up and we set it up at one of the nests. And adult males showed up, you know, getting food. Males out hunting food most of the day. During the nesting stage, it comes in about, depending on the size of the prey, let's say 6 to 9 times a day. Record I know is 17 times a day. That is just unbelievable. So we got there, and the male shows up with food and calls to the female. Female answers. And she goes over to get the food, and quick run in there and put the net up, because you want to get the male before he takes off to go hunting again. So he set it up, and now the other nest, you can see it. And we take the owl out, and the one female is scolding, right? And she's scolding, but she stays over there near her kids. And one female scolding here along with that. So we caught both adults, took blood from them, got up the tree, got the young, took blood from them. So far, so good. Then I just walk over a couple hundred yards. I put the owl down. The male flies over here, scoops at it again. I caught him again. I don't need to take blood again, do I? No, I got enough. Guess what? He's the dad. First successful case of polygyny. There's more. And here's one of the values of long-term studies. 11 years later, in that study site, 11 years later, he has collectively found 11, they're called natal dispersal birds or recruits. Gold. It's the young that you banded that eventually becomes a breeder themselves. Those are awesome data. And I've got a lot of those data. But on this polygyny thing, this was cool. Of the 8 natal dispersal birds that showed up over 11 years, and I think 8 of them were males, something like that. 3 of those were males from those polygyny nests. Wow. Just that one episode of polygyny, and 33 grandchildren of that male have been documented as being produced in that area. And this guy's like Genghis Khan. Many studies are showing now in the Class 80s in birds, there is a marked disproportionate production by just certain individuals. Wouldn't you want to know what's up with those individuals? Actually, the birds that have been my most largest producers are actually relatively small birds, relatively speaking. Anyway, this aspect of the study, I'm working on my part of the book. I just finished density. This is true. Of the reports that have been published, many of them mine, I might add, there is an 18 times difference, 18 orders of magnitude of difference between the density estimates in cities versus outside of cities, and much lower densities outside of cities. And that suggests that cities, which are growing, of course, the fastest habitat altering force on the planet is urbanization. Right? From one of the estimates was 2010 to 2015, 200,000 people each day are moving into cities. Each day, cities are going to get bigger, affluent people are going to want to feed the birds, And if we get a disproportionate amount of that stuff happening in North America, there's going to be a lot more Cooper cells. And you might think, as I did, I went, maybe there'd be more cases of polygyny. I don't think so. And I'm about to tell you why. Not yet. Cities clearly may end up being a keystone habitat, where the production in those cities will be so high, and the territories become so saturated that there'll be like floater birds that have become sexually mature, but they can't breed there. Why not? Because we already have this spot. You need to go elsewhere. So imagine these birds moving out elsewhere. And I contend that that's a reasonable speculation. Bill Stout, okay, this is, I'm going to try to keep graphs limited, but I got to use some of these. This is, we documented the colonization of Milwaukee. Here's a 5-year period in the late 1980s. These little dots here, the number of Cooper's hawks that were seen in those times by my buddy Bill Stout in Milwaukee. Never saw one of them. Wasn't looking for them. Never saw them. But he wasn't looking for them in these years either. He just all of a sudden started bumping into them. But look what happens. The frequency of just incidentally running it starts to go up. So then he goes, hey, maybe Cooper's hawks are starting to colonize Milwaukee. So he starts, he sets up a quadrant, that travels the same roads every year, keeping track of Cooper's hawk nests. The population tripled in about an 8-year period. Now, some of the first birds that were there didn't lay eggs. Maybe they were just checking it out. Is we going to be able to make it here? But at some point, they started breeding. Milwaukee must be good habitat, because as the density increased, productivity increased. Sometimes when density starts increasing, there's a feedback negative that slows you down. They kept going up. That would suggest, all other things being held equal, which is a tough one to get your head around sometimes, is that the food was not limiting. Our data suggests that they have asymptote, that they have hit some maximum densities in Milwaukee. And these are little circles here are lots of different places where we found the nests. This was, it's off here, but it's in a journal of raptor research in 2010 where we published these data. Phenomenal data set. Lucky us. The only study that has published a technical rendering defendable of a colonization and a growing of a population for the genus Accipiter in a city here in the Western Hemisphere. This is cool stuff, really cool stuff. We're going to skip right by it. I'm going to come back to it. I need to lay another foundation. All right, you can't be shy from here on out. Now we're going to talk about sex. Some students in my classes actually wake up at that point. All right, so you gotta have a little background. Songbirds are like, it's like a soap opera. They are 90% of all species of birds on the planet. Doesn't matter whether you're a songbird, whether you're a gull, they're socially monogamous. So you have a social bond between a male and a female. But especially in the songbirds, almost 90% of all families studied are genetically promiscuous. So keep a home, keep another home. Why that happens? That's a tough one. The best, and in my opinion, some of the most brilliant evolutionary avian ecologists on the planet Earth just pull their hair out trying to figure out what are the principles, the universal, if there are any, generalities would explain such phenomena. Well, then you got to know something about selection theory. And it might be as simple as saying, well, males can produce gametes like crazy. You know, in the time I've been here, I'm just producing sperm like crazy. I should use that sperm. But females are fixed. All the human females in this room had all the eggs they were going to have when they were born. Same's true for bird. And they're limited. So males should go someplace else. Have a social bond with somebody. So some claim that's why polygyny is so common in kingdom Animalia. But birds are mostly socially monogamous. What a fascinating, and yet they are strongly genetically promiscuous. But in birds of prey, not so. Why is that? Well, it might be because of this. My PhD dissertation was founded on my inability to catch trap-shy adults. I told you before that once they've been caught, they're onto it. Well, I'd find another way to catch them. So how about going in a pre-incubation? Don't bring in an owl, but bring in a starling or a house sparrow. And while they're building, display some prey to them. Brand new setup. Oh, God. Crazy. But while I was catching them, I was writing down what they were doing. I never even thought that they were copulating to any large extent. They were. And when I figured out the rate of copulations, at the time, and I put this out, this was one of the chapters in my PhD dissertation, is they copulated, get this, and birds generally copulate per clutch of eggs, I'm generalizing, broad brushstroke, about 20 times or less. Hell, there's some species, they copulate once. It's not related to clutch size. It's not related. You get 5 eggs, copulate once, and you get them all done, right? All fertilized. So there's no relationship between that. But in the birds of prey, they copulate at some much higher frequencies. In Cooper's hawks, my estimate was 372 times per clutch. So if you exclude fun from the equation, you gotta figure out what the heck is going on. Some claim it must be this. Birds of prey practice courtship feeding, and other birds do not do that, hardly at all. Courtship feeding elevates the risk of being cuckolded. You could end up raising the offspring that aren't yours. That's being cuckolded. Well, males go off and get food, and while they're gone, guess what? So when you come back to your female, you don't ask her if she's been faithful. She's going to say yes. You got to act in such a way that shows, and the things I'm telling you I'm making light of, these have been shown for all kinds of species, including us. So just accept it. But imagine, this has been tested in human salesmen who are away from their wives. So what a shock that these things would happen. At any rate, they happen. So some claim this. It's as simple as this. We copulate so many times. So when I come back with food, I go ahead and assume that Carlos has been here while I've been gone. And I inundate my female, my social mate, with my sperm. And what do? I displace or I devalue the sperm of a potential competitor. And the more I copulate, the better chance. Do you want to be raising somebody else's kids? Right? You don't want to do that. Right? So, male Cooper's hawk is gone, he comes back, and he inundates with the sperm. Right? And of course, at the time, mostly the females I was watching were marked. They stayed right there, and which is an adaptive strategy because they get fat. Fat's good. It takes weeks to build up the reserves. My data strongly suggests it takes weeks before a female can lay her egg, his eggs. Not her eggs, his eggs. Because she will not be able to produce what she needs to produce if he doesn't bring in that food in to build up those yolk reserves. I'm right on this one. I'm right. They're his. Right? So imagine in Wisconsin what I found out from my long-term market captures. This is so cool. You hatch out in the state of Wisconsin, you're a male, and you exhibit your first movement to where you're going to breed. Once you find that place, you have made a career decision. You stay there for the rest of your life. Your investment is complete. Females, they move around a little bit. My estimate, probably a pretty good estimate, about 23% of females move among years. Well, some of those movements have to be obligatory. Why? Because maybe a male's not on the site. She comes back to the site and the male's dead. All birds do die, as Frank would say, tell me. So then she has to move, does she not? If a male doesn't show up on that site. Those are obligatory, but some must be facultative. Where a female is what? Looking for the best site? Best male? Best site? Best male?
Best site? I wish somebody could tell me how that works, because I'm not sure. I'm working on that one. So imagine the lifetime investment of a male on that spot. His entire ability to put copies of his genes, alleles, into the next generation are tied to that spot. Can you imagine the significance of not being cuckolded? Right? So if you read the raptor literature, some would say, unsurprisingly, birds of prey show low rates of extra-pair fertilization, extra-pair paternity. That seems to be in accord with the fact that they're doing a pretty good job of displacing sperm of competitors, if it does happen. Okay? Owls are socially monogamous and genetically monogamous. Owls are just about as faithful. They are amazing in this respect, and yet males are gone from females. And that's the time when a male could be cuckolded, right? But extra-pair paternity has been found in a few raptors. 20%, the highest ever was 11% of offspring is an American kestrel, and 9% of the nest had at least one young sired by a male. And that was the highest, which is really low. There's some songbirds, it's like 60% of the nest had at least one extra young. But I thought, you know what, it'd be kind of cool to do this study with the Cooper's hawk. Why not? Let's take some blood and see what we come up with. So one of my ex-students, Dr. Sarah Sonshagen, who's now in the Alaska Science Center, who did her first research with me and published her first paper in 2000. And we're still working. I just got off the phone with her just a few hours ago. But the first analysis was from Milwaukee. Milwaukee had a really high-density population. So we took a bunch of blood, a lot of blood. Cooper's hawks were dropping like flies, and we just drained them. We did it humanely. She calls me up and says, "You sitting down?" "Nope, but I can." She says, "You're not going to believe what we have." I said, "What do you got, Sarah?" 20% of the young, that's twice as high as any other study for birds of prey, are produced by an extra pair sire. Wow. Really? How many nests did those 20% of the young show up in? She says 34% of the nests. I had to sit down again. I said, no one will believe that. That is completely off the grid for raptors. She says, that's what it is. I've already done quality control times 3. That's what it is. Wrote up the data. By the way, get this. At 2 nests, the male, who's tending the female, feeding her, he feeds her, he grazes on food during the day himself, feeds all the kids until the kids are actually independent when they're fledging. He didn't sire any of the young. Oh, poor guys. Let's be clear. He didn't sire any of the offspring in those 2 nests. At 2 other nests, there were 3 different males that made deposits. 3 males. I have seen during the pre-incubation period interactions between 5 adults. We have seen females, and we now know this through telemetry data and some observation of marked birds that make movements across territories during the pre-incubation period. And what are they doing? This is my speculation. They're maximizing energy uptake. What do you mean? Unlike other birds of prey, Cooper's hawks have a strong association between feeding of the female and copulations. The timing's like this, right? So male brings food in, gets some. Which means a female could trade copulations for food. So I've speculated, and Sarah and I published this paper in the journal Field Ornithology. I know the year. 2015. You go to Google Scholar, Journal Field Ornithology, Cooper's hawks extra pair paternity. You'll see that paper. When the editor got our paper, he didn't send it out to just a couple of referees. He sent it out to 4 because I'm sure he didn't believe our findings. It's just off the chart. Get this now. There are no mismatches between the females and males. They were all the right moms. You with me? Mm-hmm. Hold that thought for a minute. So what's mom doing? I think they're trading
They're, unlike other raptors, ospreys, birds that have been studied, birds of prey that have been studied, they're trading their copulations for get energy assimilation. They lay more eggs. They're her eggs, now they're his eggs. Well, they're somebody's eggs. And that's what she's doing. Deceitful. It is not, like, you need me to tell you this, that the game of sex is a game of conflict, which means it's a game of compromise. Right? I mean, that's what's going on. So, we suggested that it's probably happening more in Milwaukee because Milwaukee has a lot of, there's a male on top of a female. Milwaukee has a high density of populations, and maybe it's easy for females to find other males. Maybe. But get this. 89% of the offspring, we sampled like 104 something, 89% of the extra pair offspring, we don't know who the dads are. We caught a lot of adults in that city, and we couldn't identify hardly any of the sires. So you tell me, who are the sires? You know?
How are you determining, are you doing an actual DNA study?
You betcha.
You're doing the whole thing and sequencing it, and so you can say, okay, here's,
Yep,
so that's,
Yep.
okay.
yep. We're drawing blood so we can actually identify every individual, right? Yeah.
Bob, in that picture, it looks like the male is much larger than the female.
Just the fact that she's crouched down like this, it's just a scale factor. Guarantee you, this is a British Columbia parrot. It's a parrot cock. There could be, if the population is doing really well, a population is going to produce individuals known as floaters who become sexually mature but don't have territory. Well, that doesn't mean they can't lead a deposit with somebody. Right? So I'm on the phone this afternoon. So here, I wanted to test this hypothesis. It's an urban effect. That means if I sample more, I can compare exurban birds, like outside of Stevens Point, to birds breeding in the city. In the city, highest nesting density for Cooper's ox is right here in Stevens Point. And so I busted my butt to get some samples. Preliminary analysis, it looks about the same outside of the city as in the city. Wow. Well, there goes that idea. Beautiful hypothesis, ugly fact. And I cannot explain that. I don't know. I can do this for you. Their social system must be way more complex than we understand. It completely is going to change some paradigms, some dogmatic things about what we understand about some invasive behavior in birds of prey. Okay? So I got off the phone just a few hours, drum roll on this one. This one blew my mind. So Sarah says, I just ran the data for your other populations, our populations. So we took blood to run DNA analysis for extra pair paternity in Victoria, British Columbia, Grand Forks, North Dakota. We, of course, already have the Milwaukee sample. Then we have the Stevens Point sample, inside the city and outside the city, and one other. 9 nests in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So I got all these different samples. And I wondered, is the extra pair paternity prevalent across populations? And the population in British Columbia was genetically different from the birds here in the central part of the country. So they could be doing a lot of things differently. They're not. The extra pair paternity it's just about as high as here. Let's be clear. When I told you we detected in 34% of the nests, that's the number of nests in which fertilizations were successful. How many individuals are actually involved in potential fertilization? No idea. She said, but the reason she called me up today is she says, I got something that's a little surprising. Something that happens in ducks and happens in woodpeckers. I went, oh, no. Don't give me something else I can't figure out. She says, you might want to take a look at this. 20% of the nest had no match between the mom and the... Wow. I said, have you already, yes, I've already done quality control. How many loci did you look at? it's the same analysis we did with the other study, where we had no mismatches. I said, why don't you do that again? Run it again, because no one's going to believe that. I said, if that number is true, and it's true for several populations, that means females are dumping eggs into the nest of other females. As one explanation. That is going to... Is that not cool, though? I mean, there's part of it that's just like, okay, that's going to be hard to explain, but that's boss. I mean, that's cool. Egg dumping in raptors? Get out of here. Yeah.
You said there are males without territory. Are there females without territory? That would be then laying their eggs in other nests?
Floaters is a brand new area of avian ecology, and we're now starting to realize that this floating cohort, we don't know how many, they're hard to document because how do you find them? We found them through extra-paternity molecular analyses. There are other ways to find them. You can have removal studies. You can take birds out and see if they're replaced quickly. If they're replaced quickly, then there are birds floating around ready to get into those sites. But how many are actually there? How many of those floaters are competing with the territorial birds for resources? What are the traits of those individuals? Maybe, a lot of people think floaters is a best of a bad job scenario. I don't have a breeding site because why? Because all the territories are taken up. Isn't it possible? You get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. I don't need a territory. I don't need one. I can make a deposit. And if females start to egg dump, are you kidding me? And you thought you'd come here and get a bunch of answers? I need some. Is that not fascinating? I mean, that's cool. I'm not prompting my own stuff. That's cool. Whoever finds it out is cool. That's really neat. Jiminy crickets. This is cool. All right. How much time? We're not done. I had until tomorrow at 10 in the morning. You're going to regret, but you're never going to ask back again. I'll never do another 37 years, just so you know. Reverse-sized dimorphism in birds of prey is a fascinating area of biology. How could it not be? What the heck is that all about? And by the way, reverse-sized dimorphism is the same in all birds of prey. Some birds have a bigger size disparity between the female and the male. Red-tailed hawks are just about the same. It's hard to tell them apart. Cooper's hawks, sometimes hard to tell apart in a picture of Dr. Harpstead. But this is a species that exhibits one of the strongest degrees of reverse-sized dimorphism in the 300-plus species of birds of prey on the planet Earth. It's as if the female and the male are occupying different niches. How could they not? In vertebrate ecology, size governs so many. I mean, you can predict so many things if you have the size of the bird. Not with real precise precision, but there's a lot of correlates that follow size. So these puppies, these nestling Cooper's hawks, this is can you see the size of the female's foot here versus the male's? They're the same age. But look at how much smaller he is. All right, so all other things being held equal, who do you think is cheaper to raise, a male or a female? All other things being held equal. Wouldn't it take less food to feed a male and raise a male? Gee, what a shocker, not that across almost 40 years in our population that I've studied in one area of Wisconsin, Lake Point and whatnot, that they produce, statistically so, a preponderance of male offspring. Well, you would predict that, just based on theory, what I just told you. Reasonable, right? So imagine that's ex-Milwaukee. In fact, don't imagine it. That's what these data are. These data were published in Ecology and Evolution. I know the year. 2015. If you go to Ecology, Evolution, put my name in, sex ratios, you'll get this paper, right? So you can download it. So these, oh geez, this is cut off. That's too bad. These are years. 11 years of data. Each one of these hatch tags is a year, right? These are confidence intervals, forget those things. This is a line that indicates, here's 50-50 sex ratio. Preponderance of males, not a preponderance of males, preponderance of females. Right? Making sense? That's unusual. All right. So what are the birds doing outside in Milwaukee, like Stevens Point? Well, they're doing what you would predict based on sexual selection theory. Right? Right? What the heck's going on in Milwaukee? I think I know. I think I know. They aren't producing as many males. They're producing more of the costlier sex. In fact, it's 50-50, which means they are producing more of the bigger sex. Now, some claim that females, and by the way, if you did not know this, human males, I determine the sex of my offspring. But in birds, it's the opposite. Females determine the sex. The other heterogametic sex is the technicals. Okay? So, some theories suggest that females should adjust their sex ratios when it's adaptive for them. Adaptive. Better chance of getting copies of genes in the next generations. Right? That's a working, very good definition, actually. Right? So here's what I speculated. This is a stable population, this graph portrayal. But Milwaukee, as I just showed you, I showed you that graph earlier, that was a growing population. I'm suggesting I can explain that. I won't ever know definitively, but here's what I think is going on. Population's growing. I hypothesized in the introduction to this paper, I suggested that there should be a disparity on sex ratio between these two populations, just because one population is increasing and the other one is stable. Stevens Point has been stable for, 15, 16, 17 years, a long time. Why? Why would that happen? Because I reasoned that if you produced a preponderance of males, you'd have a bunch of males vying for whatever limited territories there are. But if you produce the limiting sex, females, who are admittedly more expensive, they have a better chance of getting into the breeding population. And I'm predicting when that population stabilizes, I'll bet you this line right here goes up here. I could be wrong. I doubt it. All the 95% of sex ratio studies, which is a fascinating area of biology. It's some of the theories. This ratio here, Mendelian sex ratio theory, could give you a 50-50. To deviate from that and to find out what the life history strategies are, as we put out in our paper, very few studies have, this is almost 2 generations of birds. In Wisconsin, 1 generation is 6 years. 6 years, that's on average, right? So this is almost 2 generations of birds, it's almost 12 years. Predictable difference between these populations. And I could buttress it with what I knew about their breeding biology, their population trajectory, densities, and I bring all that stuff into one of my longest papers to point these kinds of things out. And again, long-term data sets showing such precision or predictability across time, that is the beauty of these data. It allows you better to understand the biology. Most studies are just a couple of years and they don't identify the individuals. This is a huge component of the outcome, if you will, of I and my college and all my students continuing to gather data and make some meaning of them. This is a plucking post when Cooper's hawks are gathering food in the spring and throughout the whole nesting season. But let me, because these are spring shots. These are spring shots. Males bring in food, as I told you, they go out and get food and they bring it back to the female. When they come in, and they always call, always. The moment a male, I don't care who it is, Carlos, John, Fred, doesn't matter. The moment they land on a branch with food, they call. I mean instantly. They almost never fly to the nest or fly right to the female. The female undoubtedly can recognize who it is, just like you can recognize somebody should you ever be on a phone. My mom calls me, she does say it's mom, I know who it is. So I'll bet you $1 the birds can identify everybody. Right? Seems reasonable. There's all kinds of research to document that in birds in general. So I'm quite sure it's happening. Female flies and gets the food. and she plucks it at a spot, a plucking post, you know, and then eats it. She swallows some fur, but this is eastern chipmunk fur that has been taken off. Do you know what kind of bird this is? It's not the scale, that would be a turkey. That's a mourning dove. And there's lots of stuff in here. There's a mammal up there, most likely a shrew, cardinal. This is a junco. Do you see those yellow feathers with the gray? Anybody want to take a shot?
Fish.
A finch?
Old fish.
That's a very good guess. You're in the right group. It's a pine system. Beautiful feathers. Bird died. Right? So that Cooper's hawk is catching a wide array of things, but boy, let me tell you one thing for sure. This is the predominant prey. This, anybody have an idea? This is the outermost tail feather. On both sides, it'll have that white spot in there and an almost black color, especially in adult males. That's American robin. I didn't kill it. What do you mean? They're not my birds. No, that's it. All right, okay. Now, see if this logic makes sense. See if this logic makes sense. I know through long-term studies, consecutive generations, that, bless you, that birds that breed earlier in a season are more productive. That's true of ducks, it's true of any kind of species. Penguins. Early birds tend to do better seasonally. And I might add that in Wisconsin, bigger birds are usually the ones that start early. That's also true for all kinds of other species. And they're consistent. You know, and once you're a big bird, you're a big bird. And it's heritable. Big kids come from big parents. And I've shown that and published on that because I've caught enough adults and got their size metrics, and I can correlate it with the offspring once they become breeding birds. So I know this is true. I know it's true across populations in North America. So bigger birds, early birds tend to do better. Recent climate change has a warming effect, especially in the northern hemisphere because that's where most of the land is, and soil heats up faster than water does. You say it has a low specific heat capacity, so heats up real fast and cools off real fast. That's what happened in the desert. Right? It is possible that some species of birds might benefit from that warming and ease a constraint on their ability to produce young. How so? Well, if you could, remember this is an avivore. Cooper's hawks principally take songbirds, principally, I'm generalizing. If there's an earlier migration of songbirds, which has been demonstrated in the state of Wisconsin for robins and a whole bunch of other species, then maybe Cooper's hawks should be doing what? They should be breeding earlier. Wait, is she impatient? Working on a story here. Well, are they? Fun would be that if I just told you. Try to be still. Let me build the story.
She painted a mural on your building.
I love that mural. I'm going to take another stairway. All are on both sides now. Jiminy crickets. Are they? Awesome. All right, so here's the scenario. Here's the scenario for all of us in the room who can wait. So they should maybe start breeding earlier. Maybe they can lay more eggs. several species of flycatchers and some European birds. And if you did not know this, birds are frontline and center for documenting responses to recent climate change in terms of animals. And that's because birds are very popular. A lot of people study them. Quite frankly, that's really the big reason. But we know this. Lots of birds are moving earlier. And in some species, their production actually increased. So I was reading a paper about this time of the year ago. And it was in Journal of Avian Biology. One of the co-authors I worked with several years ago, many years ago now, on a songbird project in northern Wisconsin. Anyway, they analyzed migratory data for the Great Lakes area. And they showed that of 14 species of birds of prey studied, for which they had standardized data, a good data set if you were collected in a defendable manner, I believe it was 10 of those 14 were moving earlier through the Great Lakes area in spring. Well, that's interesting. Guess who one of those 12 is, or 10? The Cooper's hawk. And I went, wow. Now, they indicated concern for the viability of those species or those populations for which they provided no data. Just saying, look, the higher the trophic level in the grazing food chain, the higher you are removed from lower food chain elements, there's a possible or greater probability they could be decoupled in the timing of events for those other species lower down. So some claim that higher trophic level predators like Cooper's hawk, bald eagles, etc., could suffer because of that. Conversely, maybe they would improve their breeding for the reasons I just said. Which could it be? Well, and when I read the paper, I went, Cooper's hawks migrate through the Great Lakes area, although this is a partially migratory population. Wisconsin is a partially migratory population, means some of the birds leave the state and some of the birds are here all year. Our farthest recovery from birds banded in Wisconsin is Guatemala. But I've hit Florida, Mississippi, Texas, Missouri, bans in owl pellets in Missouri. Guess we know what happened to them. But I get a bunch of birds who are marked that stay on their breeding sites all year, holding them. You see red tails right now, adult red tails, not youngsters, birds of the year. Adults, they're on their breeding sites. They're holding them. They don't want anybody taking their spot. They hold them as long as they can. All year long if they can. So imagine a Cooper's hawk going, geez, you know what? I could arrive earlier. The prey's here. I can get my nutrient reserves built up right away. Yeah. Maybe even the breeding season could lengthen. The whole population, this is group selection, but forgive me. Maybe the whole population does better, right? Irrespective of the individual. Those are fascinating things, and I read this and I went, there's no way Cooper's hawks in my study area are advancing their breeding, because I know that. Why? Because I'm like out there every year. And I am climbing trees to count eggs, which most people don't do because they're smart. Because that's dangerous. And I try to climb very quickly. I usually get in our trees 7 to 9 minutes. 45 to 50 feet up is about an average height. The really tall ones, I get someone else to climb. I'll do the climbs. So I'm thinking the most immediate response from a production standpoint should be clutch counts. No, nobody gets those. I've got 6 consecutive generations of clutch counts. Well, I'll bet you are just dying to know what I was wrong. The birds are breeding earlier. I ran through all my data. It was published in the journal Ecology and Evolution. The paper just came out. Literally, just a few weeks ago. This is a 2016 publication. There's an incubating female. By the way, I get to digress for a moment. This is a female that lived for 7 years. She was at least 9 years the last time I saw her. She went through 3 males who died, and she would not leave her site. She bred right on the edge of a game farm, pheasant game farm down in Point. And look closely. Do you see the feathers on her back, how they're up? Just like the hackles on a dog's back when they're upset. I had to back up to get her picture. She would not leave her nest. I could climb up there and grab her. Neat. Anyway, so she's very productive. So I have clutch counts, right? And I'm about to show you that, but this is the, every one of these dots is the median hatch date when half the population reached a certain point every year for 36 years. Right? So I just did a regression now. So here right here is down your 70s, 80s, 90s, 2010, etc. here. This is the, and these are for descriptive purposes right here. 9 June and 30 May. So what's happening is the birds are laying their eggs earlier. This is the median hatch date if you go for eggs. Once a kid hatches out and grows to, let's say, 2 weeks of age, I can backdate when the eggs are laid because they grow at a fixed rate and I can tell the lengths of their feathers, and then I also assume 34 days of incubation, so I can retroactively determine when the eggs are laid. Cool, because I get those clutch counts. Look at that. Yep. So, why didn't I notice it? Because it's gradual, which is typically the response. What is the actual metric? Well, if you went through the regression analysis, about 1.3 days advancement every 10 years. Of course I didn't notice it. So almost a week. Almost a week. Right? Get that? That line is a dead match for the advancement of robin migration in the state over several of those decades. Chance? Hey. So, now I can answer your question. So, now, did they actually, or were they able to lay more eggs? Were they actually, and then did they have more young? Are they a greater productive population? They are not. See how many eggs in this? Just 2 miles away from here is where I counted these eggs last year. 6 eggs. What's the maximum clutch count known for the species? 8. In Milwaukee. All eggs hatched. All eggs did not hatch. Why not? Bill Stout says because a female can't cover 8 eggs. Maybe. There are 2 clutches of 7 eggs found in a Canadian data set. There are no records of 6 young in any one nest. Ever, no one's banded more than 6. I've never done that. That's max. That's max. Less than 1% of all of the clutches I've counted in 640 clutches, something like that, have 6 eggs. So very rare for it to happen, but the 6 eggs happen in every generation except for 1 egg from the 6 generations. So that's up here, clutch counts, and what you're looking at is the average clutch count is 4.3. And the average across all those years is 4.3. And the point of the matter is has the average clutch count changed? No, that line is stable. Has the brood size changed? No. Statistically, yeah, there's a little bit of rise here, but it's stable. I contend they're at their physio-ecological maximum. They are doing as well as they can. They do it earlier, and the nesting season did not lengthen. Think how adaptive that could be. If you increase the length of the breeding season, imagine the adaptiveness of this. Forgive me, I misspoke. The breeding season did not lengthen. They moved up the breeding season, which lasted about 1 month between the earliest nester and the last nester. You just moved it up, which meant that the summer is longer. So there'd be a greater chance for maybe, survivorship of the birds that do migrate? My study doesn't allow me to answer those questions. So if that's a plus for the species, for the population, I don't know. But our productivity estimates, our average clutch counts, and our average brood counts at nests where we band young, which is 3.6, 3.7 actually. That is the highest, those are the highest averages ever documented. I also contend you really can't compare this study, no arrogance, to other studies. Why? Because no one's done this for 36 years. So I don't think it's fair to compare a 3-year study to a 36-year data set. No arrogance. I'm just trying to objectively look at the data. My data are best. I meant objectively. All right, the night's dragging on. I could go on and on. Let me leave you with one other theme that long-term data allowed me to get at. This is a 1-year-old breeding male. How do I know he's 1 year of age? He's brown, and he has vertical brown streak. 1-year-old breeding males, those are rare in birds of prey studies. 1-year-old breeding females, if a female finds a male every year that it's alive, she won't have to hunt for like 4 months every year of her life. Quarter of her life, she'll never have to go kill a thing. So they go ahead and start breeding right away. Human females can breed, they mature real fast, right? Same's true of many bird species. Males have to get a territory. They do most of the nest building. They most do defense of the site. They're going to be in that site for the rest of their lives. Imagine you got 6 young, that would be unusual, if they're all females. You got to feed them. So some claim that a 1-year-old male would be rare just from a predictive standpoint. Why? They need experience to become a breeder. But what if there were so few territories that you had to fight to get into that a 1-year-old, a teenage male, could get into the breeding population because he doesn't have to fight with occupied sites with adult males? What if, when I started studying the bird in the early 1980s, contrary to what I published in the mid-1990s, somewhere in there, that we really don't have evidence to show whether the population was increasing or stable at the time I started to study, because production was really good then, contaminant levels were low, densities were high in all kinds of habitat, and I said, I have no data. I was wrong. I have data. I think I can show you that in the 1980s to the mid-1990s, the population in Wisconsin was growing. But you're going to need long-term data, and in this case, age structure. I have only caught 13 1-year-old breeding males. Really? You're going to use those 13 males to convince me that that population was growing in the 80s? I think I can do that. So let me show you how. These are his kids. By the way, I counted him when he was an egg. And one of his offspring bred with his grandmother. That was an unusual kinky thing. If you go to the literature and you look to see where studies have been done on Cooper's hawks and find out what is the prevalence of 1-year-old breeding males, none, 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 nada. One study in Victoria, which I've been a participant of, out of 579 pairs, one 1-year-old male. I think it's reasonable to say it's a rare event. And yet I got 13. But look when I got it. 1980 through 2011. All right? Number of aged males. Really all you need to look at is this. Every one of these black boxes with the number 1 is, that's one 1-year-old breeding male detected at random in my population. Remember I said I had 13? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Do you see a pattern in any way? Don't most of the 1-year-olds occur in the 1980s? I almost get them every year. One anyway. Really? So this black line is, here's 16 years, here's 16 years of this 32-year data set. This black line, first half, second half. In the second half year of the study, I found one 1-year-old breeding male. Imagine if you're like most studies, where you did a 4-year or 3-year study or a 5-year study, 6-year. Hey, 1-year-old males are rare. What if you're studying them here? Would you get that same conclusion? Well, they certainly aren't as prevalent. But the probability of getting 12 in the first half and only 1 in the second half, if you're relying on chance to explain that with randomly found nests, that is untenable. Something's going on. That's a pattern. And I'm trained to be all over that, like ugly on an ape. Something. So look at this. I'm going to try to convince you that this first couple of generations of birds in Wisconsin, this is not Milwaukee, this is outside Milwaukee, I think the population was growing and there were lots of spaces for those 1-year-old males to get into. That's what I think. Are there any confirmatory or other complementary data that would support such a speculation? Because it is just speculation. Chance is not a reasonable explainer here. Something's going on when you have a pattern like that. These are count data, indice count data in the 1980s from Cedar Grove, just north of Milwaukee. See anything going on here? They're going up. Red box, red box. What happened to the counts at Milwaukee, just north of Milwaukee, into the early 1990s? They flatlined. Gee, just about the same time I could never find another one-year-old breeding male. I suggest to you that population was growing. It became saturated, and one-year-old males are out there, but they can no longer get in. One of my oldest breeding males, he attained an age of 9 years of age. He's 35 minutes west of Milwaukee. I went to count his eggs, and I got to the nest tree, put on my spikes, started up the pines in a pine plantation. I got up about 12 feet, and John Leopold was with me, and he says, "Bob, look on the south side of the nest tree." What? He says, "There's 2 dead cooper sods here. 2 males." One was a brown bird, a 1-year-old male. He's lying about a meter away from that very old male, who was at least 9 years of age at the time. I got down her, and I said, "Oh my gosh, female's on the nest. She's got 5 eggs. They're warm." What do you think happened? I think I know what happened. They killed each other. Yeah, you move the feathers apart, you see lots of holes. My buddy has done telemetry studies in Florida, says that's one of the most significant mortality factors for adult males. They kill each other, vying for those sites. Maybe this 1-year-old teenager says, "That guy looks pretty old, I think I can take him." Made a mistake. And I told John, I said, that female has had no chance she's going to get another male. And, she's incubated. So these eggs will be cold in a couple of days. And he didn't make it. The age structure of tracking adults allowed me to retroactively. I was reading a paper in the technical literature that was looking at age structure, and I'm like, I should look at the 1-year-old males and see what I got. Wow, that's neat. Yeah.
You've been doing these genetic studies on chicks. Do the male floaters tend to be younger?
Good question. Don't know. I can't answer that question. In some birds, seabirds, we know that they take time off. They take a sabbatical, is what it's called. Breed for a while. You know what? And if you're a seabird, you get to live for 25, 30 years. They're some of the most long-lived birds. I'll take some time off. Maybe that's adaptive. Maybe that's adaptive. Because you can aggravate, even on the level of intracellular dynamics. And that kind of aggravation could cause a problem, reduce lifespan. Don't know. Floaters is one of the most fascinating areas, and this is something that's completely turning my thinking around about territoriality. Not only in birds in general, but certainly for the Cooper's hawk populations that we've been studying. And I'm right at the cusp of just having the stuff I just heard 4 hours ago about this apparent egg dumping by females. Oh my gosh, it's going to take me a long time to figure that out. How little white
You better
Russians.
live for a while. You got work to do.
Yeah, I do. I can go on and on. So let me. It's an Easter basket. Nest got blown out. Some people in their backyard. Urban Cooper's hawks? Are you kidding me? There's a book coming out this spring. I was invited to write lead author on one of the chapters on Cooper's hawks, urban Cooper's hawk. And the other chapter was conservation of urban raptors. I was asked to write the Cooper's hawk section. It's Island Press, which publishes all environmental works out of California. I know the editors. Cheryl Dykstra and Clint Bowl are going to be the editors. And in that volume, I bring together everything I know about urban birds, urban Cooper's hawks, and put it in a context of urban bird biology. And just some fascinating things. And this is a phenomenon that's going to grow and grow. People are going to be more, interfacing with urban Cooper's hawks. These people were so happy to have their Cooper's hawks here, but the nest blew out. You see one of the adults up there? Mm-hmm. And there's a puppy. You can see the head sticking out. Nest blew out, and he says, "Hey, hon, what should we do?" Kids running around. Why don't we just put up a basket? And they fledge up kids out of there using the basket. It's kind of cool. I'd have put some Easter decorations in there. This one still blows my mind. This one is,
this is in, I can't tell you the state, Indiana. Let's see, I have several pictures in my office desk drawer.
So people says, hey, we see you study Cooper's hawks, cool stuff. He says, we run a management program in our backyard.
Really? What's that?
We love the Cooper's hawks. We hate the blue